You're the one I blame for this.
I'll bet I am.
Yes, and you don't realise yet all you've done. Most of this is bound to come out. There'll be a public scandal.
Well, I don't care now.
You, you don't seem to care about anything, but I care. I was almost certain for a knighthood in the next honours list.
Oh, for God's sake, what does it matter now whether they give you a knighthood or not?
It doesn't matter to you. Apparently, nothing matters to you, but it may interest you to know that until every penny of that money you stole is repaid, you'll be working for nothing. And there's going to be no more of this drinking round town and picking up women in the palace bar.
I should think not, Eric. I'm absolutely ashamed of you.
Well, I don't blame you. But don't forget, I'm ashamed of you as well. Both of you.
Drop that. There's every excuse for what your mother and I did. It turned out unfortunately. That's all.
That's all?
Well, what have you to say?
I don't know where to begin.
Then don't begin. Nobody wants you to.
I behaved badly too. I know I did. I'm ashamed of it. But now you're beginning all over again to pretend that nothing much has happened.
Nothing much has happened. Haven't I already said there'll be a public scandal, unless we're lucky? And who here will suffer from that more than I will?
But that's not what I'm talking about. I don't care about that. The point is, you don't seem to have learnt anything.
Don't I? Well, you're quite wrong there. I've learnt plenty tonight, and you don't want me to tell you what I've learnt, I hope. When I look back on tonight, when I think of what I was feeling when the five of us sat down to dinner at that table.
Yes, and do you remember what you said to Gerald and me after dinner when you were feeling so pleased with yourself? You told us that a man has to make his own way, look after himself and mind his own business, and that we weren't to take any notice of these cranks who tell us that everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we were all mixed up together. Do you remember? Yes. Then one of those cranks walked in, the inspector. Huh. I didn't notice you told him that it's every man for himself.
Is that when the inspector came, just after Father had said that?
Yeah, what of it?
Now what's the matter, Sheila?
It's queer. Very queer.
I know what you're going to say because I've been wondering it myself.
It doesn't matter much now, of course, but was he really a police inspector?
Well, if he wasn't, it matters a devil of a lot. Makes all the difference.
No, it doesn't.
Don't talk rubbish. Of course it does.
Well, it doesn't to me, and it oughtn't to you either.
Don't be childish, Sheila.
Ugh, I'm not being. If you want to know, it's you two who are being childish, trying not to face the facts.
I won't have that sort of talk. Any more of that and you'll leave this room.
That'll be terrible for her, won't it?
I'm going anyhow in a minute or two. But don't you see? If all that's come out tonight is true, then it doesn't matter much who it was who made us confess. And it was true, wasn't it? You turned the girl out of one job and I had her turned out of another. Gerald kept her at a time when he was supposed to be too busy to see me. Eric, well, we know what Eric did. And Mother hardened her heart and gave her the final push. That finished her. That's what's important, and not whether a man is a police inspector or not.
He was our police inspector, all right.
That's what I mean, Eric. But if it's any comfort to you, and it wasn't to me, I have an idea, and I had it all along vaguely, that there was something curious about him. He never seemed like an ordinary police inspector.
You're right. I felt it too. Didn't you?
Well, I must say his manner was quite extraordinary. So rude and assertive.
And then the way he talked to me, telling me to shut up and so on. He must have known I was an ex-Lord Mayor and a magistrate and so forth. Besides, the way he talked, you remember, I mean, they don't talk like that. I've had dealings with dozens of them.
All right, but it doesn't make any real difference, you know.
Of course it does.
No, Sheila's right. It doesn't.
That's comic, that is, coming from you. You're the one it makes most difference to. You've confessed to theft, and now he knows all about it, and he can bring it out at the inquest, and then, if necessary, carry it to court. He can't do anything to your mother and Sheila and me except perhaps make us look a bit of ashamed of ourselves in public. But as for you, he can ruin you, you know?
We hardly ever told him anything he didn't know. Did you notice that?
That's nothing. He had a bit of information left by the girl and made a few smart guesses, but the fact remains that if we hadn't talked so much, he'd have had very little to go on. And really, when I come to think of it, why you all had to go letting everything come out like that beats me.
It's all right talking like that now, but he made us confess.
He certainly didn't make me confess, as you call it. I told him quite plainly that I thought I had done no more than my duty.
Oh, Mother.
The fact is, you allowed yourselves to be bluffed. Yes, bluffed.
Now really, Arthur.
No, not you, my dear, but these two. That fellow obviously didn't like us. He was prejudiced from the start. Probably a socialist or some sort of crank. He talked like one. And then, instead of standing up to him, you let him bluff you into talking about your private affairs. You ought to have stood up to him.
Well, I didn't know it's you standing up to him.
No, because by that time you'd admitted you'd been taking money. What chance had I after that? I was a fool not to have insisted upon seeing him alone.
That wouldn't have worked.
Of course it wouldn't.
Really, from the way you children talk, you might be wanting to help him instead of us. Now just be quiet so that your father can decide what we ought to do.
Yes, well, we'll have to do something and get to work quickly too. And now, who's this? Had I better go?
No, Edna will go. I'll ask her to wait up to make some tea.
It might be Gerald coming back.
Oh, yes, of course. I'd forgotten about him.
It's Mr. Croft.
I hope you don't mind me coming back.
No, of course not, Gerald.
I had a special reason for coming. When did the inspector go?
Only a few minutes ago. He put us all through it.
Sheila!
Gerald might as well know.
Now, we needn't bother him with all that stuff.
All right. But we're all in it. Up to the neck. It got worse after you left.
How did he behave?
He was frightening.
If you ask me, he behaved in a very peculiar and suspicious manner.
The rude way he spoke to Mr. Burling and me, it was quite extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
You know something. What is it?
That man wasn't a police officer.
What?
Are you certain?
I'm almost certain. That's what I came back to tell you.
Good lad. You asked about him, eh?
Yes. I met a police sergeant I know down the road. I asked him about this Inspector Gould and described that carefully to him. He swore there wasn't any Inspector Gould or anybody like him on the force here.
You didn't tell him...
Oh, no. I passed it off by saying I'd been having an argument with somebody. But the point is, the sergeant was dead certain there hadn't any inspector at all, like the chap who came here tonight.
By jingo, a fake!
Didn't I tell you? Didn't I say? I couldn't imagine a real police inspector talking like that to us.
Well, you were right. There isn't any such inspector. We've been had.
I'm going to make certain of this.
What are you going to do?
Ring up the Chief Constable, Colonel Roberts.
Careful what you say, dear.
Of course. Brumley 8752. I was going to do this anyhow. I had my suspicions all along. Colonel Roberts, please. Mr. Arthur Burling here. Oh, Roberts. Burling here. Sorry to ring you up so late, but can you tell me if an Inspector Goole has joined your staff lately? Goole, Goole, a new man. Tall, clean-shaven. I see. Yes. Well, that settles it. No, just a little argument we were having here. Good night. There's no Inspector Goole on the police. That man definitely wasn't a police inspector at all. As Gerald says, we've been had.
I felt it all the time. He never talked like one. He never even looked like one.
This makes a difference, you know. In fact, it makes all the difference.
Of course.
I suppose we're all nice people now.
If you've nothing more sensible than that to say, Sheila, you'd better keep quiet.
She's right, though.
And you'd better keep quiet anyhow. If that had been a police inspector and he'd heard you confess.
Arthur, careful.
Yes, yes.
You see, Gerald, you haven't to know the rest of our crimes and idiocies.
That's all right. I don't want to. What do you make of this business now? Was it a hoax?
Of course. Somebody put that fellow up to coming here and hoaxing us. There are people in this town who dislike me enough to do that. We ought to have seen through it from the first. In the ordinary way, I believe I would have done, but coming like that, bang on top of our little celebration, just when we were feeling all so pleased with ourselves, naturally it took me by surprise.
I wish I'd been here when that man first arrived. I'd have asked him a few questions before I allowed him to ask us any.
It's all right saying that now.
I was the only one of you who didn't give in to him, and now I say we must discuss this business quietly and sensibly and decide if there's anything to be done about it.
You're absolutely right, my dear. Already we've discovered one important fact. That fellow was a fraud and we've been hoaxed, and that may not be the end of it by any means.
I'm sure it isn't.
You are, eh? Good. Eric, sit down.
I'm all right.
All right? You're anything but all right. And you needn't stand there as if
As if what?
As if you'd nothing to do with us. Just remember your own position, young man. If anybody's up to the neck in this business, you are. So you'd better take some interest in it.
I do take some interest in it. I take too much, that's my trouble.
It's mine too.
Now, listen, you two. If you're still feeling on edge, then the least you can do is keep quiet. Leave this to us. I'll admit that fellow's antics rattled us a bit, but we found him out, and all we have to do is to just keep our heads. Now it's our turn.
Our turn to do what?
To behave sensibly, Sheila, which is more than you're doing.
What's the use of talking about behaving sensibly? You're beginning to pretend now that nothing's really happened at all. And I can't see it like that. This girl's still dead, isn't she? Nobody's brought her to life, have they?
That's just what I feel, Eric, and it's what they don't seem to understand.
Whoever that chap was, the fact remains that I did what I did, and Mother did what she did, and the rest of you did what you did to her. It's still the same rotten story, whether it's been told to a police inspector or somebody else. According to you, I ought to feel a lot better. I stole some money, Gerald. You might as well know. I don't care. Let him know. The money's not the important thing. It's what happened to the girl and what we all did to her that matters. And I still feel the same about it. And that's why I don't feel like sitting down and having a nice, cosy talk.
And Eric's absolutely right. And it's the best thing any of us has said tonight. And it makes me feel a bit less ashamed of us. You're just beginning to pretend all over again.
Look, for God's sake.
Arthur!
Well, my dear, they're so damned exasperating. Why won't they try to understand our position or to see the difference between a lot of stuff like this coming out in private and a downright public scandal?
And I say the girl's dead and we all helped to kill her, and that's what matters.
And I say either stop shouting or get out. Some fathers I know would have kicked you out of the house anyhow by this time, so hold your tongue if you want to stay here.
I don't give a damn now whether I stay here or not.
You'll stay here long enough to give me an account of that money you stole, yes, and to pay it back too.
But that won't bring Eva Smith back to life, will it?
And it doesn't alter the fact that we all helped to kill her.
But is it a fact?
Of course it is. You don't know the whole story yet.
I suppose you're going to prove now you didn't spend last summer keeping this girl instead of seeing me, eh?
I did keep a girl last summer, I've admitted it. And I'm sorry, Sheila.
Well, I must admit you came out of it better than the rest of us. The inspector said that.
He wasn't an inspector.
Well, he inspected us all right, and don't let's start dodging and pretending now. Between us, we drove that girl to commit suicide.
But did we? Who says so? Because I say there's no more real evidence we did than there was that chap was a police inspector. Of course there is. No, there isn't. Look at it. A man comes here pretending to be a police officer. It's a hoax of some kind. Now what does he do? Very artfully, working on bits of information he's picked up here and there, he bluffs us into confessing that we've all been mixed up in this girl's life in one way or another.
And so we have.
But how do you know it's the same girl?
Now, wait a minute. Let's see how that would work. Now, no, it wouldn't.
We all admitted it.
All right. You all admitted something to do with a girl. But how do you know it's the same girl? Look here, Mr. Burling. Like a girl called Eva Smith. You've forgotten, but he shows you a photograph of her and then you remember, right?
Yes, that part's straightforward enough, but what then?
Well, then he happens to know that Sheila once had a girl sacked from Millwood's shop. He tells us that this girl is the same Eva Smith, and he shows her a photograph that she recognises.
Yes, the same photograph.
But how do you know it's the same photograph? Did you see the one your father looked at?
No, I didn't.
And did your father see the one that he showed you?
No, he didn't. And I see what you mean now.
We've no proof it was the same photograph, and therefore no proof it was the same girl. Now take me. I never saw a photograph, remember. He caught me out by suddenly announcing that this girl changed her name to Daisy Renton. I gave myself away at once because I'd known a Daisy Renton.
And there wasn't the slightest proof that this Daisy Renton was really Eva Smith. We've only his word for it. And we'd his word for it that he was a police inspector. And we know now he was lying. So he could have been lying all the time.
Of course he could. Probably was. Now what happened after I left?
I was upset because Eric had left the house, and this man said that if Eric didn't come back, he'd have to go and find him. Well, that made me feel worse still, and his manner was so severe, and he seemed so confident. Then quite suddenly, he said I'd seen Eva Smith only 2 weeks ago.
Those were his exact words.
And like a fool, I said, yes, I had.
I don't see now why you did that. She didn't call herself Eva Smith when she came to see you at the committee, did she?
No, of course she didn't. But feeling so worried when he suddenly turned on me and those questions, I answered more or less as he wanted me to answer.
But Mother, don't forget that he showed you a photograph of the girl before that, and you obviously recognised it.
Did anybody else see it?
No, he showed it only to me.
Then don't you see? There's still no proof it was really the same girl. He might have showed you the photograph of any girl who applied to the committee. And now do we know she was really... Sorry, how do we know whether she was really Eva Smith or Daisy Renton?
Gerald's dead right. He could have used a different photograph each time and we'd be none the wiser. We may all have been recognising different girls.
Exactly. Did he ask you to identify a photograph, Eric?
No, he didn't need a photograph by the time he got round to me. But obviously it must have been the girl I knew who went round to see Mother.
Why must it?
She said she had to have help because she wouldn't take any more stolen money. And the girl I knew had told me that already.
Even then, that may have all been nonsense.
I don't see much nonsense about it when a girl goes and kills herself. You lot may be getting yourselves all out nicely, but I can't. Nor can Mother. We did her in all right.
Wait a minute. Don't be in such a hurry to put yourself into court. That interview with your mother could have been just as much of a put-up job, like all this police inspector business. The whole damned thing can have been a piece of bluff.
How can it? The girl's dead, isn't she?
What girl? There are probably 4 or 5 different girls.
That doesn't matter to me. The one I know, one I knew, is dead.
Is she? How do we know she is?
That's right. You've got it. How do we know any girl killed herself today?
Now, answer that one. Let's look at it from this fellow's point of view. We're having a little celebration here and feeling rather pleased with ourselves. Now he has to work a trick on us. Well, the first thing he has to do is to give us such a shock that after that he can bluff us all the time. So he starts right off. A girl has just died in the infirmary. She drank some strong disinfectant, died in agony.
All right, don't pile it on.
There you are, you see. Just repeating it shakes you a bit. And that's what he had to do. Shake us at once and then start questioning us until we didn't know where we were. Oh, let us admit that. He had the laugh of us, all right.
He could laugh his head off if I knew it really was all a hoax.
I'm convinced that it is. No police inquiry, no one girl that all this happened to, no scandal.
And no suicide?
We can settle that at once.
How?
By ringing up the infirmary. Either there's a dead girl there, or there isn't.
It will look a bit queer, won't it, ringing up at this time of night?
I don't mind doing it.
And if there isn't?
Anyway, we'll see. Bromley 8986. Is that the infirmary? This is Mr. Gerald Croft of Crofts Limited. Yes. We're rather worried about one of our employees. Have you had a girl brought in this afternoon who committed suicide by drinking disinfectant? Or any like suicide? Yes, I'll wait. Yes, hello? You're certain of that? I see. Well, thank you very much. Good night. No girl has died in there today. Nobody's been brought in after drinking disinfectant. They haven't had a suicide for months.
There you are. Proof positive. The whole story is just a lot of moonshine. Nothing but an elaborate sell. Nobody likes to be sold as badly as that. But for all that... Gerald, have a drink.
Thanks. I think I could just do with one now.
So could I.
And I must say, Gerald, you've argued this very cleverly, and I'm most grateful.
Well, you see, while I was out the house, I had time to cool off and think things out a little.
Yes, he didn't keep you on the run as he did the rest of us. I'll admit now, he gave me a bit of a scare at the time, but I'd a special reason for not wanting any public scandal just now. Well, here's to us. Come on, Sheila, don't look like that. All over now.
The worst part is, but you're forgetting one thing I still can't forget. Everything we said had happened, really had happened. If it didn't end tragically, then that's lucky for us, but it might have done.
But the whole thing's different now. Come, you can see that, can't you? You all helped to kill her, and I wish you could have seen the look on your faces when he said that. Going to bed, young woman?
I want to get out of this. It frightens me the way you talk.
Nonsense. You'll have a good laugh over it yet. Look, you'd better ask Gerald for that ring you gave him back, hadn't you? Then you'll feel better.
You're pretending everything's just as it was before.
I'm not.
No, but these others are.
Well, isn't it? We've been had, that's all.
So nothing really happened. So there's nothing to be sorry for, nothing to learn. We can all go on behaving just as we did.
Well, why shouldn't we?
I tell you, whoever that inspector was, it was anything but a joke. You knew it then. You began to learn something and now you've stopped. You're ready to go on in the same old way.
And you're not, eh?
No, because I remember what he said, how he looked and what he made me feel. Fire and blood and anguish, and it frightens me the way you talk, and I can't listen to any more of it.
And I agree with Sheila. It frightens me too.
Well, go to bed then, and don't stand there being hysterical.
They're overtired. In the morning, they'll be as amused as we are.
Everything's all right now, Sheila. What about the ring?
No, not yet. It's too soon. I must think.
Now, look at the pair of them, the famous younger generation who know it all, and they can't even take a joke. Yes. Mr. Burling speaking. What? Here. That was the police. A girl has just died on her way to the infirmary after swallowing some disinfectant. And a police inspector is on his way here to ask some questions.